Okay, close the gate.
Playing through Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay is one of the few times I've played a video game for the sole reason of people telling me how amazing it is, then ending up with a confusing and often unenjoyable experience, and genuinely wondering if I'm playing the game incorrectly. It's a first-person shooter/stealth game developed by Starbreeze Studios and based around the Vin Diesel character Riddick, made famous by his appearance in the cult film Pitch Black. Now technically there's 3 versions of the game. There's the original Xbox version released early 2004, then the developer's cut for PC released in late 2004. Finally there's the remastered edition or remake or whatever the hell you want to call it, which was bundled with the sequel Assault on Dark Athena released in 2009, which is the version we're mostly going to be taking a look at in this review. Regardless of how I feel about the half-assed shooting and stealth, this is a fantastically well-told story and utterly entertaining in that regard. Escape from Butcher Bay has superb production values, from the amazing music and voice acting, which is some of the best you're likely to hear in a video game, through to the art style and overall visuals. Even if it does tend to overuse normal mapping, depth of field, and the fact that every surface looks like it's covered in baby oil. Riddick as a protagonist is just such a compelling and enjoyable character to play as. He's hardly a hero in any sense of the word. In fact, the guy's a total prick at times. He threatens and often murders people to suit his own agenda, and he has total disregard for everyone aside from himself. He's a fantastic example of an anti-hero, and the fact that Vin Diesel does such an awesome job with the voice acting makes him even more of a badass.
See this? It belongs to me.
The supporting cast is also of a high standard. There's other well-known actors like Ron Perlman, Michael Rooker, and Cole Hauser, and even someone like your boy Exhibit does a really good job with the material.
You done, Abbott? Or you need more?
You're a hard-ass, Riddick, but we're about to soften you up.
The only downside to the cinematics is the lip syncing and some of the animations, which are pretty horrible, though you can't really knock that considering the time of the game's release, and the overall performances make up for this.
I think you're gonna need backup.
So in the opening cinematic, Riddick is brought to Butcher Bay Prison by bounty hunter William Johns and soon released into the general population. At this point, the game world sort of works as a hub as you move around a few sections of the prison, doing odd jobs for inmates and making a name for yourself before a prison riot begins and Riddick is able to escape. At this point, you get your hands on some firearms like a pistol, shotgun, and assault rifle, but throughout the campaign, there's frequent shifts in the gameplay, swapping mainly between melee combat, stealth, and shooting, and taking away your current equipment for plot-related reasons. It's got to be said that the level design across the board is fantastic too, with all of the hub areas feeling like real places and plenty of side tasks and collectibles to find. There's also a lot of variety between the environments as well, which is admirable for a game set in one location, and there's also great use of lighting, tapping into the whole theme of Riddick and his eye shine ability, which forms a major component of the gameplay. Shooting out light sources isn't essential, but it gives you a much needed edge over the many enemies you'll come up against, especially during gunfights. And yet it pains me to say this, Sonny Jim, but these 3 core mechanics, being the melee combat, the stealth, and the shooting, aren't really as refined as they should be. First off, the melee combat. Now, to be honest, it does seem simple enough on the surface. You've got a strike and block button assigned to the left and right mouse button, and when you press the directional keys in certain directions, it's going to perform different moves. When an enemy strikes, your equipped weapon flashes for a moment, allowing you to retaliate with a powerful counter-attack if you time it correctly. In the original 2004 edition, this doesn't even occur at all, making combat even more tedious. Now, this works fine against most opponents, but against the tougher enemies, it's not even available as a mechanic. Which means the best you can do is simply hold down the block button and try to get a quick hit in between them hitting you. The boss fights requiring melee are a battle of attrition as you slowly whittle their health down. Now, thankfully, melee combat forms a very small component of the overall gameplay. However, the same can't be said about the stealth and shooting. The stealth in Butcher Bay is again really unrefined. Now, the way this works is that you're either in the darkness and you're totally invisible, or you're in the light and enemies go ballistic in an instant and start attacking you. Half the time you turn a corner or open a door without possibly being able to have any clue an enemy is going to be standing right there, and your whole stealth run is completely gone to shit. What the game encourages you to do is to go around shooting light sources, which is fine, but for a large section of the game when you're unarmed, you don't have a ranged weapon to do this. It seems like the developers might have even been aware of how shoddy the stealth is to some degree, and instead of fixing it, they give you this silent tranquilizer gun with unlimited rounds about halfway through the game, which almost breaks the stealth because of how easy it becomes. And I gotta say that I'm just absolutely flabbergasted, that's right, I said flabbergasted, when I hear people talking about how good the stealth is in this game, because it's the absolute bare minimum needed to create a stealth mechanic. And it's not like it was even that good for its time either. I mean, upon release there were other stealth games like Thief and Splinter Cell that properly used the idea of sound, movement speed, and the light and shadow as a mechanic for stealth, and they did this very well. Which finally brings us onto the shooting, which again is somewhat limited, and you're mostly going to be using a pistol, assault rifle, or shotgun. Shooting suffers primarily because the controls feel very jittery. It's one of those third-person games set in a first-person perspective, if that makes sense, where the proportions of your character's body is taken into account. So if you walk into a wall, the weapon's going to be raised up into the air instead of unrealistically passing through it. Now that's fine, but it does mean the controls are very janky, as the weapon kind of wobbles all over the place. The crosshair isn't really an indicator of where a shot is heading either, and bullets will sort of arc out in a cone-like shape around whatever it is you're aiming at. Shooting things is fine in and of itself, it's just that none of the weapons have all that much of an impact. Enemy AI is basic, bordering on stupid at times, and the only challenge against armed opponents comes from their perfect accuracy compared to the tactics or strategy they may use against you. To mix the shooting up, you're often up against armoured opponents who can only be damaged from behind, and also everyone's favourite emaciated zombie type enemies, and then later on some screeching insect-like enemies as well, both of which I consider to be the absolute bane of FPS enemy designs. Then on top of all of this, the game uses an utterly horrible checkpoint system that saves when you change maps, but it also seems to save at random. So if you've screwed up a gunfight and are left with little ammo and health for your next encounter, well, bad luck for you, Sonny Jim. I think at this point it might also be worth mentioning the key differences between the remake and the original PC developer's cut released in 2004. Well, for starters, obviously the visuals look a little bit different, but in all honesty, not by a great deal. Texture details seems to be roughly the same, though the character models are also noticeably lower polygon, but then on the flip side, the image quality seems a lot sharper, due to the absence of modern visual effects that look like smeared Vaseline. The lip syncing in the cinematics is still horrible as well, though on the plus side the game does now allow a more traditional quick save system, making some of the more irritating sections more bearable. The base gameplay, however, is largely unchanged. In fact, I see little to no difference whatsoever. I mean, I think the handling of certain weapons may be different, but it was minimal if at all. Both games, however, really do suffer from the half-baked shooting, stealth, and melee combat controls, and it's a damn shame because this game tells a very well-written, dark, and mature story. Much like another game that Starbreeze Studios worked on, The Darkness, again a game with a very similar mechanic focusing around shooting out light sources and a protagonist skating a thin line between hero and villain. Both of these games are largely let down by some minor gameplay irritations, but are held up by a really solid foundation.
Darkness. You afraid?
Overall though, I'd probably still recommend Escape from Butcher Bay, only because it's just so unique in its content and tone. I don't think it really matters which version you go with, they're largely both the same where it matters most, but the remake is obviously much more accessible. The original 2004 edition did give me a bit of grief when I tried to get it working with Windows 7, but the official patch fixed all of the problems I was having. Whether or not you're a fan of Riddick as a character, I think doesn't matter all that much. There are few games with such a well-told, gritty sci-fi setting that put you in the shoes of one of the most badass motherfuckers of all time. And getting Dark Athena thrown in there as well is also a pretty sweet deal, and on that note, and in the next video, we'll take a look at that game and see how it holds up.
It ain't the fall that gets you. It's a sudden stop at the bottom.